with you a short lecture on the birth of democracy. The birth of a democracy is not owed to just one man. It is owed to the Greeks in whole. But the path of democracy begins with a man named Solon. Solon was known to the ancient Athenians as lawgiver. And although Solon did not establish democracy in ancient Athens, he was able to set the Athenians on the path of democracy by creating a constitution that gave its poorest citizens basic rights. At the time, the gap between the rich and poor was so wide that a vast majority of Athenians were on the verge of becoming slaves. Solon set out to stop the enslavement to the less privileged Athenian people. He canceled their debts, which allowed them to continue contributing as citizens. And although he did not give back their properties, he does state, within his own words, his reasons for doing this. For the common people I give as much power as is sufficient, neither robbing them of dignity nor giving them too much. And those who had power and were marvelously rich, even for those I contrived that they suffered no harm. I stood with a mighty shield in front of both classes and allowed neither of them to prevail unjustly. Solon's contribution to democracy was majorly based on constitutional rights given to the poor citizens. He also broke Athens into 4 classes: the aristocrats, the warriors, the farmers, and the laborers. Solon's system lasted until the end of tyranny in ancient Athens. At the end of the tyrant rule of Athens, 2 brothers, Hippocrates and Hippias, were considered the leaders of Athens. It was during this time that the 4 aristocratic families of Athens broke out into fractional strife. This, of course, caused a lot of turmoil between the citizens of Athens and led to civil war. During the Hippocrates rule, many families were exiled. Due to the civil war, they were recalled to Athens to help restore the government. The head of the Alcmaeonid family, Cleisthenes, attempted to reform Athens' constitution. But at the time, a man named Isagorius wanted to continue the tyrant rule of Athens. Isagorius once again exiled Cleisthenes from Athens and called upon King Cleomonius, the king of the Spartans, to help him restore order to Athens. The people revolted and drove the Spartans out of Athens. They recalled Cleisthenes to Athens to finish his reforms. Cleisthenes set out to disband the rule of the aristocratic families and also called upon the aid of King Cleomonius in order to control the aristocratic families. In order to break the alliances between the families, he broke Athens into 10 tribes. He distributed these 10 tribes between 4 regions: the mountains, the plains, the coast, and the city. He further broke down the tribes into what is known as demes, or what we could refer to as neighborhoods. The whole of Athens consisted of nearly 140 demes. The redistribution of population broke down the family alliances and allowed democracy to develop in Athens. From here out, all citizens had the right to vote. Each triad would send 1 person to serve in the Senate, chosen by lottery. This system allowed for fair representation of everyone. And though women and children were not considered citizens, any man 18 years of age or older who was not a slave was considered a citizen and was expected to vote. During the time of Cleisthenes, there was approximately 10,000 actual citizens that were allowed to vote. Cleisthenes' reforms were put into effect almost immediately. Sparta had asked Athens to join them in a war against the Persians. Under Cleisthenes' new reforms, the citizens were given a chance to vote whether or not to go to war. The Athenians joined the Spartans, and in a war where the men were outnumbered nearly 3 to 1, they were able to win. In the recorded words of Herodotus, he states, "Thus Athens went from strength to strength, and provided if proof were needed, how noble a thing freedom is, not in one respect only, but in all. For while they were oppressed under a despotic government, they had no better success in war than any of thy neighbors. Yet, once the yoke was flung off, they proved the finest warriors in the world. The statement of Herodotus shows the pride that the Athenian people took in their new constitutional rights. And if it wasn't for Cleisthenes' innovative way of breaking down the population and redistributing the power amongst the citizens, we may not be a democratic population today. We owe a debt of gratitude to these men who set humanity on the path of democracy and believed all humans deserved basic rights.